Assalamu alaikum. So welcome back. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue with the next letter, of course. But before we continue, let's quickly summarize what has to do with the tongue. So we've taken the back of the tongue, right? Where we have qaf and kaf, good. We've taken the middle of the tongue where we have jayshun, jim, ya, and shin, good. Then we've taken the side, hafatul lisan. Side of the tongue with what? With the adras, with the molars, the side molars. Okay, where we have the letter word, good. And then afterwards, we have taken lam, right? Lam. And that is adena hafatul lisan, the down part of the tongue. When you have the tongue like this, the down part towards the tip, touching the gum of the what? Of the two front incisors, the gum at the back of the two front incisors. So as in al, you can see. So that is for lam. So inshallah ta'ala, today we are going to be taking the next letter, which is nun. Very good. So an important fact, a very important fact about nun. Actually, nun has a twin. Has what? A twin. And the twin of nun is actually harf mim, the letter mim. So we have nun and mim. There's something about them that the other letters doesn't have. Okay. And what is this thing that is special about the two of them is that they have a primary point of articulation where we can say, okay, the letter is coming out from this place. But in addition, they also have a secondary point of articulation, or should I call it a secondary feature? A secondary feature that completes their pronunciation. So which means you cannot pronounce nun from the tongue alone without that additional feature, which is what we call ghunna, a nasal sound from the nose. You cannot pronounce nun itself without that feature of ghunna, of nasal sound from the nose. And the same way you cannot pronounce mim from the words from the lips, we are coming there, without adding the secondary feature, which we call ghunna from what? From the nose. It's not possible. So that is why we call, okay, let me just mention that, then we'll go back to explaining the nun. So we call the primary point of articulation of nun and mim, their primary point of articulation, we call it juz'u mukammal. Juz'u mukammal. That is a part of pronunciation of these letters that has been completed. And we call the secondary feature from the nose that completes it, we call it juz'u or juz'un mukammil, the parts of the pronunciation of these letters that complete the primary parts. Anyways, don't let us go too much into the technicalities. Let's get back to nun. So where does nun come out from? Nun, when you want to pronounce nun, for example, let's pronounce it first. We give it sukun. Let's put fatha before it. We have something like an. So what do you notice? The tip of the tongue, taraful lisan, the tip of the tongue, ma'allifati al-thanaya al-ulya, touching the gum behind the two front incisors, an, just like al, but the point of articulation of nun goes, a bit backward, or we say lower. We say al as in lam, al, then you say an. You see, it went a bit back. Al, lam, an. So an, al. You can see the difference. Good. So which means the point of articulation of nun is what? Is the tip of the tongue touching the gum behind the two front teeth, two front incisors. That is where we get the nun from. Now, that is not its only point of articulation. It has to be accompanied by what we call ghunna, the nasal sound from the nose. So that is why, how do you know this? How are you sure that it has to be accompanied? Try it again. An. Now block the nose. Ad. You see, it will be very difficult to pronounce because you want to block that particular sifa, that particular attribute of the nose, which has to complete its pronunciation. So you are saying ad, it will be blocked. You won't be able to pronounce it. So this is telling you that is the second point of articulation of nun. Barakallahu fikum. So let's get into the pronunciation of nun with sukun. For example, with sukun, we have a simple word as yan'auna, or as simple as man, mim fatha ma, nun sukun, man. You can see that is nun sukun. And when it sticks fatha, we have something as simple as naumun, na, naumun, naumun. When it takes kasra, we have something as simple as what? As ni'al, ni'al, or niqash, ni'al. As simple as that. When it takes dhamma, we have something as simple as what? As nufusun, nufus, nufus. Something as simple as that. You can get many other examples from the Quran Al-Kareem, from the Quran Al-Kareem. So this letter itself, we have a little bit of its foundation in many of the languages. So many people would not, ordinarily make mistake while pronouncing this letter. When it takes sukun, fatha, kasra, dhamma. But when it takes sukun, when it comes to applying the other rules of Nono Sakina and Tenwin, there's a chapter like that in Tejweed. We call it the rulings of Nono Sakina and Tenwin. Because Nun, whenever it takes sukun and it's come before some particular letters, there's different number of ways you deal with it. You deal with its pronunciation. Sometimes you have to pronounce it clearly. For example, man, aman, man, You can see how I pronounced it there. Man, Sometimes you might need to merge it with what is coming next. For example, miwara, miwa. There you would not say minwa, minwa. In that instance, you will have to say miwa, merge it. Some instances you might need to hide it. For example, man kana, man ka. Things like that. Sometimes you might need to change the nun to mim. For example, mim ba'di, mim ba'di. Some changes occurs like that based on the circumstances. So now, why applying these rules, which hopefully later we're going to learn, okay? Some people might make mistakes in that regard. But basically, in the pronunciation of nun taken sukun, it's, the level of mistake in applying that is actually low. But in applying the rules that are attached to it when it's come across with some other letters, then that is where mistakes truly occur. Okay? Barakallahu fikum. So we'll stop there. We'll meet in the next episode. I hope you understand. Assalamu alaikum.